Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Mr. Vasquez here. I'm going to read the second part of what I was telling you guys about Christopher Columbus. Hope you guys are okay. Hope you're dealing with the boredom or stress as good as can be. I know it's a trying time here, and I just hope that, we're able to get through this and everyone be okay and safe. This section, again, it's from this book here that I've been reading from. A lot of the stories I read come from this. This one's called 1492, which is pretty much a follow up of what we're talking about with Christopher Columbus. So without further ado, it was not only Toscanelli's map showing the coast of Africa only 3,000 miles from Portugal, which of course, the coast of Asia, only 3,000 miles west from Portugal, which of course is way wrong. That made Columbus think of sailing out into the Sea of Darkness. There is a story that a young sailor Columbus had once. There was a story that as a young sailor Columbus had once been to Iceland and heard tales of a land in the west which the Vikings had found. They called Vinland. Columbus may have thought that Vinland was a part of Asia, but in any case, it was a story that there was land not too far away beyond the Sea of Darkness. Something else which happened when he was still a map maker in Lisbon was that one day a boat with two dead bodies was washed ashore on the coast of Portugal. These bodies were brown skinned, and Columbus, of course, could only think that they were the natives of India, which probably was a mistake. This guy just lucked into all kinds of stuff, it sounds like. Anyways, but he was quite right in thinking that this boat could not have been drifting for 10,000 miles. It would have sunk long before reaching land if it had. It could only have come at a much shorter distance. So Columbus was right about one thing. There was a coast only a few thousand miles away across the Sea of Darkness. His mistake, and it was the mistake of Toscanelli also, was to think that the coast beyond the ocean was Asia and not North and South America. And even making this mistake, Columbus was still wiser than the learned monks of Queen Isabella, who said if he had sailed down the globe, he could never sail up again. One day, Columbus got so impatient with their silly arguments that he said to them, "You tell me my voyage is not possible. How do you know what is possible or not? Tell me, is it possible to make an egg stand on the table?" "Of course not," said the learned monks. Then Columbus had an egg, brought it in. He set it so hard on the table that the shell broke and was flattened, and the egg stood. "It is possible, and so is my voyage. You'll see. You'll all see, and then you'll be sorry," or something like that. And in the end, his wish was fulfilled. He was given 3 ships to sail out into the Sea of Darkness to find China and India and to bring back gold and spices. They were good ships. The Santa Maria and her companion vessels, the best ships of that time. These kinds of ships were called caravels. These caravels differed from a Viking's dragon ship. A Viking ship had only one mast and one square sail, but it could not sail close to the wind, that is, at an angle against the wind. If the Vikings wanted to go in the opposite direction of the wind, they had to row and row hard. But caravels had 3 masts and 3 sets of sails, the fore, which is in the front, the mizzen, which is in the middle, and the big one, and the mizzen, which is in the back, and usually the smallest. And could sail close to the wind. And close to the wind means as long as the wind's not blowing directly backwards, if it was some sort of angle, they could still do their job to work their way up, up, up. But if the wind's dead against you, you have to go back or put the sails down and wait. but they figured it out and had it work. Let's see. The caravels were a great improvement compared with the Dragon ships, but compared with modern ships, they were very small. The Santa Maria, the largest, had only room for 40 sailors, and the two other vessels carried only 25 men each. That's pretty small. One time I spent time, quite a few times, in Jamestown in Virginia, taking school groups out there, which is the first English settlement, and they have the ships that were carry the original sailors there. The replicas of it, and you walk around these two different ships, and it's kind of the same idea where. And these ships were, 130 years or so after these ships were made. Even these ships that were, 100 years newer, I guess. They're tiny. They're really tiny, and the fact that they crammed so many people into the quarters that it would have been an awful journey. I'm kind of claustrophobic anyways, and being under the deck of these other ships. You can't stand upright. You can't really sit right. You're just always kind of cramped dealing with that stuff. It makes it really uncomfortable. So I imagine the Santa Maria, the Nina, and the Pinta were even smaller than those ships that I saw when I was in Virginia. So there you go. Here we go. They were also very uncomfortable boats. The bodies of the caravels were much rounder than modern ships, and being so small, they pitched and tossed like washtubs on the waves. None of these wooden ships was really watertight, and so the bottom was always filled with bilge water, which had a terrible stench and was a breeding ground for cockroaches. Only the captain had a cabin and a bunk for himself. The crew had to lie down. Below deck in the stench and among the rats and the cockroaches. There was only one meal a day, consisting without change of without what? There was only one meal a day, and without it, that meal was basically beef jerky, tough salted meat, you soaked in the water and super salty. Dried peas they had, rock hard ship's biscuits. You can buy similar things today in Hawaii. They sell them. So next time you're in Hawaii, if you look for, they're called pilot crackers nowadays, ship's biscuits. It's all kind of the same, and they're about yay big around. They sell them salted or not. And the company also makes cookies. The cookies are good. Ship's biscuits are kind of fun to eat. You put that in a bowl of like chicken noodle soup. It takes about 30 seconds to actually get soft enough to break your fork through it. Anyways, they're into that. Let's see. Water was carried in kegs, and after a few days at sea, had a brackish taste. That's salty. This was the kind of ship that set out on the most famous voyage in history in August 1492. They were not fast ships. It took them 3 weeks to reach the last known islands in the Atlantic, Madeira, which had been discovered by Prince Henry's sailors. They only stayed a short while to take in fresh water. Then the real journey into the unknown began. The first days were perfect. Gentle winds swelled the sails, and Columbus kept a steady course due west. But after a week, by the middle of September, the ships encountered something which astonished and frightened the sailors. For miles and miles, as far as the eye could see, the water was covered with floating seaweed, and the sailors, who had never seen such an endless area of seaweed, feared the ships would get stuck in the seaweed and never be able to move backwards or forwards, remaining there forever, and all the men dying of hunger and thirst. The sailors fell to their knees and prayed to God. But their fears were unfounded. The ship sailed easily through the weed of the Sargasso Sea, as it is called. After they passed through the seaweeds, there came other things to worry the sailors. There came strong wind, which blew the ships with great speed westwards, further and further west, and took every mile took them further and further away from their homeland. Now the sailors feared they'd be blown to the rim of the world, but Columbus quieted their fears, and the sailors took new heart. And so 3 weeks passed. It was a whole month since they had seen land. Never before had men been so these European men had been so far away from land. Columbus himself was now uncertain. According to his reckoning, they should have reached Japan already, but on October 8th there was still no sight of land. Weird. Only the endless ocean. Columbus was uncertain, but his sailors were desperate. The captains of the other two ships came aboard the Santa Maria and demanded the ship should turn back. There was no sense in sailing into the blue emptiness that stretched out before them on all sides. The sailors were wild with fear and excitement. They cursed Columbus, calling him a murderer who led them to their deaths. Columbus pleaded with the captains and with the crews. He asked them to sail westward for another 3 days, and if they should still see no land, they'd return back and sail home to Spain. Grumbling and cursing, the sailors agreed. And now it seemed as if the winds wanted to help Columbus. A strong wind of nearly gale force rose and drove the ships with great speed westwards. Columbus hardly slept at all. Day and night he stood on the deck, waiting for a glimpse of land. The first and second of the 3 days he had agreed on passed. The third day came and went, and there was still no land. In the middle of the night, it was October 11th, Columbus saw a flicker of a flame across the water, and the news spread among the sailors. At 2 a.m. the moon rose, and a great cry went out, "Land, land, ahoy, land ho, land ho, land ho." In the light of the moon, they saw a shimmering white sand dune, and behind it hills rising. The sailors cried and laughed and prayed and sang, and nobody slept that night. And when daylight came, the sailors saw a crowd of natives gathering on the shore, shouting and talking excitedly among the natives. Columbus rowed ashore in a boat, and his two captains followed him. He dressed in dark velvet, with purple silk stockings, carrying in one hand a sword, which is, a friendly thing to do, isn't it? And the other a royal banner of Spain, which is telling these people, hey, this belongs to Spain now. He was the first to set foot on this new land, from Spain anyways. The natives stood and stared in wonder at these strange white-skinned visitors. Then Columbus stood up and declared that the new land to be the possession of their royal majesties, the king and queen of Spain. I imagine the people there didn't understand what was going on, but I'm sure they could tell that that pointy metal thing was sharp. The sailors cheered, and then they came and asked for forgiveness for their faint-heartedness 3 days earlier. Columbus thought he had reached India, but we know that on October 12th, 1492, he had arrived. So there's that part of the story. Again, there's a whole other half of the story we need to dig into at some point or another, and, what it was like to live on that island and see that ship appear. And I hope to be able to dig into that a little bit. If we were in class, we could totally do that. This kind of a thing makes it difficult and weird. I can't really research as well as I'd like. Anywho, I hope things are as good as can be for you guys. I hope you're getting fresh breath or fresh air. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.